Hello and happy gaming, everyone. This is Dark Sage Walker, and hey, it's been a while since I've talked about some good old gaming news. I mean, outside of, the one that I just did about... God, what the hell was it I was talking about? Well, whatever, it'll come to me, so... But yes, I haven't done a lot of decent gaming news, so I've actually had some time to build a few things up, and there have been a good few things that have popped out lately. Now, I could talk a little bit about the Game Awards and some of the winners that came up. I figure I can do that while I'm doing a little Bumbo or some of my other content. Right now, I think we need to talk a little bit more about Stadia. Now, I have been following a little bit about what's going on with Google Stadia, not necessarily because I'm super interested, but because I'm curious to know just how far they're going to take this bullshit of a platform. We've already seen that Google could not deliver on their promises, that all of the things that they promised were going to happen obviously have not. They couldn't even get the buddy pass right, and to be fair, why? If you gave one of your friends a 3-month trial to Google Stadia, let's be fair, you might not be friends with that person much longer. I mean, it is the most subpar way to play games that I've yet experienced outside of, the Atari Lynx. Who remembers that? I bet you don't. So... the issues with Stadia are myriad. We've already gone over, how quickly you're going to bust your data cap, the type of internet that you need to have in order to get it to work, and then even then, the lack of crossplay for people who are playing on it. So if you're playing Destiny 2 on Stadia and you want to play with your buddies who are playing on PC or Xbox One, too fucking bad, you're not doing it. And one of their biggest marketing pitches is how just about every game is going to be able to be played on 4K at 60 FPS. How it's got so many more teraflops. As a matter of fact, in comparison, the PlayStation 4 Pro has 4.2 teraflops. The Xbox One X has 6. But Google Stadia, oh baby, hold on to your seats. We got 10.7 teraflops to work with. It's so much stronger than either of these systems. You'll get the best games at the best quality. Well, so far you've already failed that with two of the bigger titles. Destiny 2 certainly ain't running 4K 60. And to top it all off, there's that lovely little control lag. That means that, especially on a twitchy action game like, Destiny 2, oh yeah, you are going to be suffering trying to play that game. Good luck trying to predict where everything is going to be a good half a second to a second before it gets there. And the other game that had not met that was Red Dead Redemption 2, which was basically running at 1440p and then somewhat visually upscaled to 4K, which meant it was blurry as shit. But now 2 more games join the we lied about our technical prowess Stadia lineup in the form of Final Fantasy 15 and Metro Exodus. And what Digital Foundry found in the Eurogamer article that I will link in the description, I actually mean it this time, is that basically what you're getting with Final Fantasy 15 is it just runs at 1080p 30 frames per second. It delivers, here, let's actually just read the first paragraph of this article. It's Final Fantasy 15. It's streaming from remote servers, and by and large, it's identical to the existing console versions of the game. And that's quite a neat trick, especially when transitioning gameplay from 4K TV to laptop to smartphone. However, there's no doubt that there's a severe lack of ambition in this Stadia port in terms of its core technological credentials. Google's on-paper CPU and GPU spec outstrips Xbox One X in all dimensions, yet Final Fantasy 15 on Stadia runs at just 1080p at 30 frames per second. delivering an overall experience closer to the base PlayStation 4. Now, to be fair, the big thing that Stadia does well is that you've got severely cut down load times, and you really don't have to worry about downloading anything. But is that really enough? If you're going to be playing games at subpar visuals with subpar performances with control lag, sorry, I'll just keep working with my, old-fashioned downloads and updates, thank you very much. I'm not worried about load times so long as they're not extraneous. If you're going to push your hardware as going, but there's no load times, sorry, don't care. It's actually not anything I even care about. Let's see, further in the article, the best way to play on Stadia is through Chromecast, notably the Ultra version, which enables 4K streaming of the game. Still talking about Final Fantasy 15. Sadly, running through the Google Chrome browser on PC fixes the game to a lower bitrate at a 1080p output. For our work, we accessed the 4K feed on a 300 megabyte per second connection rated excellent by the service. We've had some issues here, actually. Sometimes the same connection is merely rated good, and we don't get 4K at all. Regardless, the blunt truth here is that even with a 4K video stream, pixel counts of the image still come in at a native 1920 by 1080. As you'll see in the video and the comparison images on this page, there's no competition when stacked up against Xbox One X's 4K mode, which actually runs at a dynamic resolution with 3360 by 890 at the top end. There's a big drop in image quality as a result, even without factoring in Stadia's inherent compression. Fundamentally, the image streamed across simply isn't a 4K image, or anything close to it, despite it saying so. The only benefit I can see to having 4K activated in the menus is more bandwidth allocation to getting an upscaled 1080p across, which will result in a clearer image. So, we have Stadia lying about that game. Again, big surprise. I'm honestly not surprised. But now Metro Exodus also has the same problem. Metro Exodus on Stadia looks as good as Xbox One X, but doesn't run as well. Once again, right from the article. One of the best single-player first-person shooters of the generation, Metro Exodus, is an ideal match for Google Stadia platform, so says them. Developer 4A Games not only has a pedigree for excellent multi-platform releases, it's also exhibited strong support in the past for Linux, the underlying platform on which Stadia is based. The question is, just how has 4A chosen to make use of the system's Intel-based CPU and 10.7 teraflop GPU, and is the expectedly superior level of performance we expect delivered by Google's cloud-based servers? Let's cut to the chase. The one thing above all others that I respect about this version, the core image quality. Stadia pushes a native 3840 by 2160 in every shot I've tested. No small feat given the demanding nature of the engine. And while I can't 100% rule out dynamic resolution scaling, it's been very consistent at that top number. I can't fault it. So in this respect, it's a key improvement over the last Stadia title I tested, Final Fantasy 15, which operated at just 1080p. The bottom line is that if you're using Stadia with Chromecast Ultra and you have the Pro subscription, you are getting 4K, and Metro Exodus does look stunning. So they actually delivered on that part. It actually is 4K. Let's see. One factor I'm trying to... So looking over... Here we go. We'll just keep reading the article for right now, and you can stop me when you figure out... And I'll stop myself when I figure out what the problem is. The payoff for a narrative-focused game like Metro Exodus is clear. From the pulse of specular highlights in its damp metro tunnels to the crisp, snowy overground, everything pops that much more. The story gets propelled to a greater height this way. Certainly much more so than PS4 Pro's 1440p delivery. It puts Stadia essentially on the same level as Xbox One X. Sadly, there's no quality or performance modes at all in the settings. You just have options for motion blur intensity, and that's it. It is a one-size-fits-all approach, which, again, like Final Fantasy XV, means you've got to be on board with the developer's choices. This is well pitched, though. In a multiplayer FPS, yes, it may have been better to prioritize to aim for a higher frame rate, seeing as we're stuck at 30 FPS here. But in this case, it works. You can expect a supremely sharp presentation all around. One factor that holds Stadia back from matching Xbox One X quality is video encoding quality. Generally speaking, the streaming is top-notch in most games, when it works. But Metro Exodus is unique by design. It takes on a much darker color palette than most titles, with lots of trawling through dark spaces, and the blunt truth is that, as a result, the darker points of the image show more compression artifacts. Google's encoder works to minimize the size of each frame by pruning back quality on low contrast areas. Which makes sense, but detail in dark areas is an issue with any bandwidth-constrained video encoder, creating obvious bands between points of shade, and therefore, in comparison with Xbox One X's uncompressed video output, it does start to undo the positives of rendering at 4K. So basically what they're saying is the game is going to get, especially with all the dark areas, there's going to be lots of digital artifacting that starts to undo the way that it looks. What you are losing though is that the game stutters quite a bit. Here we go. There's a final topic to address which is a touch disappointing. Performance. Everything so far points to an Xbox One X-like experience on Stadia, which is great. But only if the frame rate can hold, and you'd assume it would. With Stadia apparently offering more power on tap and operating with equivalent settings to what we understand to be a less powerful machine, performance should be on par or better. And yet that's somehow not translated across. The bulk of play is at the same 30 FPS as the X, but taxing effects, like transparencies, cause more of a hit to performance than they do on the Microsoft machine. Shootout situation in areas lavish in lighting and fog effects run worse on Stadia, and for a console way ahead in its reported GPU power, it's not quite here. In some scenarios, frame rate can even drop down to 20 FPS territory. Add in some stuttering and frame pacing troubles, and it doesn't feel as well optimized as it should be. In similar scenarios on Xbox One X, we're looking at a straight 30 FPS. It's also worth noting that input lag in Metro Exodus is noticeably on the high side. Anecdotally speaking, adding around 44 to 55 milliseconds of latency to a game, which already had a bit of input lag, does it no favors, and it makes precise shooting and action scenes very challenging. Some games translate to a streaming platform better than others. RPGs and adventure titles with fixed camera tend to work better. Here, though, the disconnect between controller and reaction is far more noticeable. So once again, we're seeing a situation where, despite the fact that it does reach the 4K part, the frame rate doesn't hold, the video artifacting in dark areas starts to really mess with the system, and of course the input lag, which there's nothing that you can do about that because it's all streaming, creates huge problems for Stadia and its games. And once again, I feel the need to ask, who is Google Stadia for? It can't be for someone who really wants truly good hardcore experiences, because you can't get truly good hardcore experiences on a system that's constantly laggy when you go to do your inputs. Last I checked, the serious death of any decent action game, or any game that requires any kind of quick reflex, is the input lag. And they say that it could do RPGs, but only if they're purely turn-based. Let me flash back to about the early to mid 90s when Final Fantasy IV came out. Final Fantasy IV works with a game system known as the ATB, Active Time Battle System. That means that even when you're in menu selecting your options, the enemies are still making their choices and going even while you're making yours. Meaning that if that input lag causes you to, let's say, just for instance, miss a cure spell, and the enemy hits you and knocks you out, not only is that cure spell wasted, but that may very well spell the end of the fight in more difficult scenarios. Especially if you're playing one of the harder versions of Final Fantasy IV, because, let's face it, the Super Nintendo version was kinda gimped. But if you're playing one of the harder versions of Final Fantasy IV, you need every input to matter, and if you get screwed on an input because of input lag, there's nothing you can do about that because, well, I'm just gonna say it, Stadia is bullshit. There's just no two ways about that. The technology, the cloud gaming idea, simply isn't quite there yet, or if it is, Google hasn't mastered it. So I'm still saying, if you're going to go with cloud gaming, wait for Project xCloud. At least they give you access to an entire library of games. And might I add, I'm also real skeptical on cloud gaming because of the lack of ownership. That, to me, is one of the biggest downsides of cloud gaming to begin with. I'm not too skippy on the idea of paying full price for something only to be allowed the temporary privilege of being able to access it. Sorry, once I pay for it, I expect to be able to access it at any time. Even if it just exists as data on my hard drive, that still means I can access it. It's not just a temporary license or a privilege to play a game. I have access to that data. I can still use it whenever I want. You can't say the same thing about Google Stadia. And that's just the stone cold bottom line with that. So overall, Stadia is looking worse and worse as time goes on. Any of these people who are out there actually paying for the Stadia Pro membership, guys, do yourselves a favor, get your money back. Make sure Google knows that this is not acceptable. And don't implicate yourselves into thinking that this has to be because, cloud gaming is the future. It's only the future if it fucking works. And if it doesn't work, get your money back. Don't give these charlatans a cent of your hard-earned money for something that they can't even deliver on. They haven't delivered on any of their core promises, and I see no reason why the end user should have to pay for that. Fuck that noise. Fuck Stadia. Keep playing on your dedicated PCs and your consoles. You're just going to get a better experience. That's all for me for at least this topic. But there are other topics to talk about, and I will be back since I actually have time to do videos today. So that having been said, thank you very much for watching. Do the subscribe, the bell, the comment, the like. It's an awful lot to ask for, I understand, but it's how you get somewhere in this whack-a-day YouTube world. So, until next time, my name is Dark Sage Walker, and I will be seeing you.